Before we dive into the story, please subscribe to our channel. That would help me a lot, and you are free to change your mind anytime later. Now let's begin the story. The early morning sun filtered through the bedroom curtains. I smiled as Sarah's slender form stirred beside me. Her auburn hair splayed across the pillow like a fiery halo. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of her never failed to make my heart flutter. "Morning, beautiful," I murmured, planting a soft kiss on her bare shoulder. Sarah's eyes fluttered open, emerald pools sparking with familiar mischief. "Morning yourself, handsome." She rolled over, snuggling closer. "You're up early for a Saturday." "Big day at the office," I replied with a rueful grin. "The Anderson project is down to the wire. I need to go over the final blueprints." She pursed her lips in that adorable pout I loved. "Can't those stuffy old architects give you a break? It's our anniversary next week." I know. I traced the contours of her face, drinking in her radiant features. "I'll make it up to you, I promise. Once this project wraps, I'm taking you on a second honeymoon, just the two of us." The promise of future adventures smoothed the crease between her brows. "You'd better, mister. I expect romancing worthy of those cheesy romance novels you pretend not to read." I feigned a scandalized gasp. "I have no idea what you're talking about." We dissolved into a familiar dance of gentle teasing and affectionate banter. These were the moments that made the long hours worthwhile, the quiet intimacy Sarah and I shared, the easy camaraderie born from a lifetime of memories. As I slipped out of bed and into the shower, her lilting laughter echoed in my ears, a soothing balm against the stresses of the day ahead. The cafe was already bustling by the time I arrived, a cheery oasis amidst the urban hustle. Sarah's newest art installation, a vibrant mural spanning one wall, added a touch of whimsy to the cozy interior. I snaked my way to the counter, exchanging friendly greetings with the regulars. "Morning, John." Sarah's bright voice carried over the din as she emerged from the kitchen, an apron tied jauntily around her slender waist. "You're just in time for a fresh batch of blueberry muffins." "You know me too well." I gratefully accepted the proffered pastry, still warm from the oven. "This should tide me over until lunch." She swatted me with a dish towel. "You and your hollow leg. I swear, you'd waste away without me to feed you." "Perish the thought," I grinned, taking an exaggerated bite. Our familiar banter continued until the morning rush pulled Sarah away. I savored those stolen moments, a brief respite from the demands of my career. As I nursed the last crumbs of my muffin, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride and contentment. This life we'd built together, the thriving cafe, our cozy apartment, the enduring strength of our partnership, was everything I'd ever dreamed of. If only I'd known then how swiftly dreams could shatter. The following days blurred into a relentless cycle of client meetings, frantic revisions, and countless hours poring over schematics. The Anderson project was my firm's biggest account, a make-or-break deal that could catapult us into the big leagues. I threw myself into the work with a single-minded focus, the stakes too high to entertain any distractions. Sarah understood, of course. She always did. While I toiled away at the office, burning the proverbial midnight oil, she ran the cafe with her usual effervescent charm. Our nights together dwindled to fleeting moments of exhaustion, a mumbled good night, and a reassuring squeeze before sleep claimed us. I told myself it was temporary, a short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. Once the project wrapped, I promised myself I'd make it up to her tenfold. A romantic getaway, quality time together, all the things a loving husband should provide. Sarah deserved that and more. The night it all unraveled, I barely registered the ominous cracks of thunder rumbling in the distance. I was too consumed with the task at hand, making last-minute adjustments to the presentation I'd be giving to the Anderson partners the following morning. Attention to detail had always been my forte, a key factor in my firm's meteoric rise. It wasn't until I called Sura to check on her. She picked up the phone, but no one was speaking. "Sarah, is everything okay?" I repeated it many times. A beat of silence, punctuated by the crackle of static. Then there was a slurred voice of a man I didn't recognize. "Who is this bothering, Sarah?" A jolt of unease lanced through me. Sarah never drank to excess, a lingering trauma from her tumultuous childhood. Was she all right? "This is John," I managed, my voice tight with sudden trepidation. "Is Sarah all right?" A raucous laugh, laced with bitter scorn, crackled through the tiny speaker. "John? You shouldn't be here, buddy. Sarah's mine now." A kaleidoscope of emotions, shock, disbelief, rage, roiled through me in a dizzying vortex. I barely registered the phone clattering to the desk, the sound distant and tinny. Without conscious thought, I surged to my feet, a primal fury propelling me forward. Snatching my keys from the credenza, I raced out of the office, heedless of the curious stares from the night staff. The only thought pounding through my mind was a mantra of desperate denial. Not Sarah. It can't be Sarah. The drive home passed in a blur of rain-slicked pavement and screeching tires. A vague part of me registered I was speeding, risking a collision with my reckless abandon. But that tiny voice of reason was drowned beneath the thunderous roar of gut-wrenching scenarios playing on a catastrophic loop. As the familiar facade of our apartment building loomed into view, equal parts sanctuary and prison, I barely remembered to brake. The car careened into the parking lot, coming to a screeching halt mere feet from the entrance. I didn't wait for the smoke from the tires to dissipate. I flung myself out of the driver's seat, oblivious to the torrent of rain instantly soaking me to the bone, and sprinted for the doors. The elevator ride was an exercise in excruciating patience. Every labored second felt like an eternity as the ancient contraption lurched upwards with agonizing lethargy. I could have taken the stairs and arrived quicker, but some primal part of me clung to the desperate hope that it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd fling open our apartment door to find Sarah safe and sound. How naive I was. When the doors finally shuddered open on our floor, I burst forth with the force of a battering ram. The few stumbling steps to our door felt like miles as I fumbled with the keys, my hands trembling violently. Then it yawned open, and the sight that greeted me was the first fissure in the bedrock of my world. Sarah, my beautiful, vibrant Sarah, lay sprawled on the living room couch in a drunken stupor. Her eyes, those sparkling emerald depths I'd fallen into 1,000 times before, were glassy and vacant, devoid of any recognition. And pressed against her, his calloused hands roaming her body with a grotesque familiarity, was a complete stranger. White-hot rage detonated within me, incinerating every rational thought. Coherent words eluded me as I crossed the threshold, propelled by a tsunami of primal fury. The intruder's gaze snapped up, his eyes widening in shock and fear as he registered my presence. But he was too late. With a feral roar, I launched myself at him, closing the distance in 2 strides. We went down in a tangle of flailing limbs, grunts of exertion, punctuated by the dull thud of fists striking flesh. He fought back with the desperation of a cornered animal, but the advantage of surprise was mine. The fight was over before it truly began. My initial charge, powered by a volcanic eruption of rage, caught the intruder completely off guard. He was still tangled with Sarah on the couch, his eyes glazed with a mixture of lust and inebriation. "What the fuck?" was all he managed before my fist connected with his jaw, the crack of bone reverberating through the room like a gunshot. He went down in a graceless heap, temporarily stunned by the sheer ferocity of the blow. Sarah, jarred from her stupor by the commotion, let out a startled shriek. "John, what are you?" I didn't let her finish. A primal snarl ripped from my throat as I launched myself at the fallen man, raining down a flurry of wild haymakers. Rationality had abandoned me, subsumed by the all-consuming need to inflict pain, to make this pathetic bastard suffer for violating the sanctity of my home, my marriage. He shielded his face with his forearms, curling into a defensive ball as the blows rained down. "Stop. Please, I'm sorry." His blubbered apology only fanned the flames of my fury. I seized a fistful of his greasy hair, wrenching his head back with enough force to whiplash his neck. "You're sorry?" I hissed through clenched teeth, my voice distorted by the molten fury coursing through my veins. "You come into my home, defile my wife, and that's all you have to say?" Terror glazed his eyes as my knuckles connected with his cheekbone, the crack of bone sickening. "I didn't know she was married, man." She never said. Distantly, I registered Sarah's cries, her pleas for me to stop echoing through the chaos like whispers on the wind. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The intruder's face was a grotesque mask of blood and swelling, his whimpers trailing off into blessed silence as unconsciousness claimed him. I recoiled, panting like a winded animal, every ragged breath a physical manifestation of the torment clawing at my soul. Sarah's hands were on me then, tugging at my arm with surprising insistence. "John, please. You're going to kill him." The shrill panic in her voice penetrated the crimson haze. I turned towards her, truly seeing her for the first time since entering the apartment. Her eyes, those vibrant emeralds that had once entranced me, were swimming with unshed tears, her features contorted in an anguished rictus I didn't recognize. "How could you?" Each syllable carved from the ragged remnants of my shattered heart. "After everything we had, how could you do this to us?" Her lips parted. Whether to offer an excuse or a plea for forgiveness, I'll never know. Because in that moment, with the stark reality of her betrayal, a physical presence looming over us, I knew there was no coming back from this. No words could undo the damage. No tearful apologies could restore the sacred trust she'd so carelessly decimated. Without a backwards glance, I turned and strode from the apartment, the leaden weight of heartbreak compounding with every step. The rain had tapered to a dreary drizzle, the storm's fury spent, much like my own. I descended the stairs in a daze, oblivious to my surroundings until the night air caressed my face with its melancholy chill. How long I stood there, exposed to the elements yet numb to their bite, I cannot say. I couldn't go back, not now. The apartment, the life I'd built with Sarah, it was all tainted by the bitter tincture of her indiscretion. I climbed into my rain-soaked car and pulled away, leaving that wretched scene in my rearview mirror. The memories, though those would prove more tenacious specters. Morning dawned gray and dreary, as if the world itself was draped in melancholy. I watched the sun rise listlessly from my chair, having foregone sleep in favor of a bottle of scotch and a spiral into abject misery. Somewhere between numb detachment and searing anguish, the pieces began falling into place. Like a skilled tactician surveying a battlefield, my mind meticulously reconstructed the events of the previous evening, scrutinizing each detail for hidden meaning. Sarah's drunken state, uncharacteristic for her, the stranger's familiarity, his apparent surprise at learning of her marital status, it all reeked of premeditation, of a carefully constructed deception that had been unraveling for God knows how long. The thought unlocked a fresh wellspring of rage, cauterizing the wound of heartbreak with the blistering promise of retribution. My sweet, artistic Sarah, the woman I'd loved with every fiber of my being, none of it had been real. She was a fraud, a master of deception who had played me for the fool while carrying on with who, exactly? The question gnawed at me as I retrieved my phone. A few terse calls confirmed what I'd already suspected. The stranger was one Mark Hendricks, a local musician who frequented the cafe Sarah ran. Putting the pieces together didn't require a feat of deductive reasoning. Their bond had formed over shared frustrations and artistic stagnation, twin malignancies that had metastasized into an all-consuming cancer. Perhaps if I'd been more attentive, less consumed by the demands of my career, I would have recognized the signs. Perhaps if I'd made more of an effort to nurture the embers of Sarah's passion, she had made her choices, just as I would make mine. The bedraggled figure hunched at the kitchen counter barely registered as Sarah when she finally roused herself sometime in the late afternoon. Her eyes were swollen and rimmed with dark circles, telltale signs of a hangover that would have elicited sympathy from me once upon a time. Now, I felt nothing but a hollow pang of revulsion as she flinched at the sight of me, her entire form radiating shame and wariness. "John." She rasped my name like a prayer, each syllable saturated with desperate hope. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to—" "Don't." The curt rebuke sliced through her words with surgical precision. "Whatever pitiful excuse you're about to offer, save it. I don't want to hear it." She flinched as if struck, fresh tears welling in her reddened eyes. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" I arched a contemptuous brow. How you seduced another man in our home. How you betrayed every ounce of trust and commitment that formed the foundation of our marriage. Each accusation lanced through her like a barbed arrow, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I watched her crumble with a practiced detachment, willing away any last vestiges of sympathy. She had made her choices, and now the consequences would follow. I want you out of here by tonight. The words emerged in a toneless rasp, yet carried all the weight of finality. I've already contacted my lawyer. We'll handle the separation proceedings through proper channels. John, no. The whisper was barely audible over the thunderous cacophony of my own turmoil. Please, don't do this. I love you. I never stopped loving you. For the first time since that fateful night, I felt something other than anguish and rage pity. Pity for the pitiful shell of the woman I'd once adored, groveling and begging for a crumb of the devotion she had so carelessly squandered. My lips twisted into a bitter facsimile of a smile. If that were true, you would never have done this to us. I rose from my seat, unable to endure her mewling pleas a moment longer. I'll have the rest of your things sent to your mother's place. The separation proceedings unfolded with a cold, clinical efficiency that surprised even me. Perhaps I should have anticipated Sarah's capitulation. In the wake of her betrayal, she seemed a hollow facsimile of the vibrant woman I'd once loved, drained of the defiant spark that used to ignite my soul. She offered no objections as my lawyer dissected our once blissful union with the indifferent precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The apartment, the contents we'd so carefully accumulated over the years, even the cafe that had been the crown jewel of her ambitions. It all fell to me like consolation prizes in the aftermath of emotional Armageddon. For Sarah's part, she retreated from the legal maneuverings as if in a daze, allowing the dominoes of her life to scatter in total disarray. I watched the dissolution of everything she'd worked toward with a sort of morbid fascination, at times struck by fleeting twinges of residual concern for her well-being. But those faint stirrings were always fleeting, overwhelmed by the twin tides of bitterness and righteous indignation that had become the cornerstones of my existence. She had chosen this path, after all. The consequences were hers to bear. In the weeks that followed the separation being finalized, I channeled every ounce of my emotional turmoil into two singular obsessions: work and revenge. I was nobody's fool, content to slink away and nurse my injuries in solitude. No, the very notion was antithetical to my core principles, the uncompromising values instilled by my mother's tireless sacrifices throughout my youth. I had been wronged, violated in the most profound way, and there would be a reckoning. What began as aimless internet trawling during the sleepless hours eventually solidified into a precise battle strategy. I meticulously mapped out the parameters of my vengeance, cultivating a spectral online presence through a myriad of anonymous identities and burner accounts. From there, I started laying the foundations for Mark's downfall with a surgeon's precision. The first tracks were laid through a series of negative reviews on popular musician forums, subtly undermining his credibility as a live performer. Seemingly innocuous comments about tardiness, unreliability, unprofessionalism, a drip feed of subtle toxicity that gradually eroded his reputation from within. The real coup, however, was gaining access to the private communications of local venue managers and booking agents through some, let's say, morally questionable channels. From there, it was almost trivially easy to plant the seeds of doubt, to draw their attention to Mark's rapidly deteriorating public image through a few well-timed, concerned patron messages. I watched his upcoming gig calendar with a sort of grim satisfaction, relishing the gradual contraction of his projected income streams. Against such a multi-pronged assault, even his die-hard supporters among the local music community eventually grew skittish, the risk of aligning with damaged goods too severe to dismiss. It wasn't long before the dominoes began to topple in earnest. Venues started canceling his shows en masse, his phone dwindling into a haunting silence where it had once chirped with the promise of budding success. I could picture his desperation, his indignant bewilderment as the construct he'd devoted his life to came crashing down around him. Good. Let him suffer as I did. With Mark's fledgling career circling the proverbial drain, I turned my sights towards the more arduous task of dismantling Sarah's beloved cafe. Her pride and joy, the embodiment of the dreams she had once allowed me to share in. Crushing it would be a masterstroke, a wound that would fester for years to come. It required more finesse than the smash-and-grab sabotage I'd unleashed on Mark. The cafe was Sarah's lifeblood, an establishment with years of goodwill and community support buttressing its foundations. A more delicate touch was required to initiate its collapse, laying the groundwork for a crisis from which it could never recover. Once again, I relied on the power of anonymity to weave my web. This time, however, the attacks came from a more official vector. A series of meticulously compiled grievances submitted through the proper municipal channels. Health code violations, unsubstantiated at first, until the reports started rolling in from concerned citizens with remarkable consistency. I salted the proverbial earth, ensuring the grievances encompassed every conceivable angle of operation. Food safety, cleanliness of the premises, even absurd indictments of the restroom facilities, and potential vermin infestations. One by one, the buckshot of accusations slowly overwhelmed the defenses, prompting increasingly frequent inspections that eventually mandated emergency renovations. And just like that, the once thriving cafe ground to a halt, its doors shuttered as it underwent the renovations I'd so insidiously catalyzed. The loss of revenue during that period alone would have been a devastating blow. But I wasn't content to merely let the establishment wither on the vine. I tracked the inspectors' visits meticulously, timing the release of each new grievance to maximize the delays and escalating costs. Within months, the cafe had become little more than a vacant husk, drained of life and vibrancy. The pittance of Sarah's savings was rapidly depleted, her dreams reduced to ashes on the altar of my vengeance. When she finally reached out, voice trembling with the first embers of defeat, I'll admit a part of me relished the moment. I pictured her, stripped of the bright-eyed optimism that had once set my heart ablaze, desperate and broken, and utterly at my mercy. The meeting itself was a hollow, perfunctory affair. We rendezvoused at a nondescript cafe on the outskirts of town, the bland setting as devoid of emotional resonance as the shattered remains of our relationship. She looked gaunt, pale, the fading light in her eyes mirroring the emaciated ruin of her once vibrant spirit. "John," the plea was a sigh, an anguished exhalation that stirred neither pity nor mercy within me. "Please, I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe that." My answering stare was as frigid as a glacier. "You made your choices, Sarah. Now you're facing the consequences." But this, she flung an arm outward in a vague, impotent gesture. "The cafe, ruining Mark's career. Is this really what you want? For everyone's lives to be destroyed over one mistake?" "A mistake?" I hissed, leaning across the table to impale her with a gaze of molten fury. "Carrying on an affair behind my back, lying to me for God knows how long, that wasn't just a mistake, Sarah. It was a conscious choice, made over and over again until the truth finally came to light." She recoiled as if struck, tears welling in eyes that had once shone with adoration for me. In that moment, impossibly, I felt a perverse flicker of vindication. Good. Let her suffer a fraction of the agony she had inflicted upon me. "I wanted to build a life with you," I continued, each word measured and precise as a scalpel's caress. "To weather any storm, conquer any hardship, side by side as partners. You shattered that with your selfishness, your weakness. This," I gestured around us with a contemptuous sweep of my hand, "this is the consequence you've brought upon yourself." "I'm sorry." The apology was tinny and hollow, swallowed by the deafening silence that stretched between us, a chasm as vast and impassable as the oceans that once separated continents. "I never stopped loving you." I regarded her with a strange sense of detachment, as one might regard a pathetic stray whimpering for scraps. "If that were true, you would never have destroyed everything we had." The memory of that fateful night flickered behind my eyes, the raw lacerations of her betrayal visceral as the moment they were inflicted. I sucked in a steady breath, willing away the lingering shadows. "We're done here, Sarah." The finality in my voice brooked no argument. "I've said all I have to say." With that, I pushed away from the table and strode from the cafe, leaving Sarah's shattered form in my wake. Each step felt leaden yet curiously weightless, as if I was shedding the final vestiges of the life we had once shared. That was the last time I spoke with Sarah. I started focusing on my work, started taking therapy, and slowly but steadily, I started to move on. Months passed, and I bumped into Sarah at a local art exhibit. She was pale and gaunt, a shadow of her former self. Her paintings, once vibrant expressions of joy, were now filled with a haunting loneliness. A pang of unexpected empathy struck me. I didn't approach her, but as I walked away, I noticed a flicker of something in her eyes. I felt bad for her, but she made a mistake that I couldn't and would never forgive her for what she did with me. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.